Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are watching us from. On the behalf of Nepal Institute of International Cooperation and Engagement and the Water Policy Center, it gives me a great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, the chairs, and the participants who are registered for the event. This is the sixth session for the conference. To the chair moderator this session, it's a real pleasure to have Major General B.K. Sharma here with us. Major General B.K. Sharma is the Director, United Service Institution of India, USI, India's oldest think tank established by British in 1817. He specialized in strategic net assessments, scenario building, and strategic gaming. He was conferred 3 military awards by President of India and rendering distinguished national service and for displaying courage. Besides, he was conferred National Award for Nation Building by the Confederation of Education Excellence of India in 2017. General Sharma has edited about 8 books, contributed more than 60 seminar papers in Indian and foreign journals and newspapers, and presented 30 research papers at international conference. He edits prestigious USI Strategic Yearbook. He has lectured at prestigious military establishments, policy, think tanks, and universities literature festivals in India and abroad. He regularly participates in the Tank 2 level dialogue. Without any further ado, let me now request Major General B.K. Sharma to moderate the session.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction. I'm really grateful to NIICE, which is also a think tank partner, and to Dr. Pramod Agarwal and his team for doing a phenomenal work to promote strategic culture and foster understanding across different nationalities and different think tanks. So my session is very, very interesting today, and I have 5 very erudite speakers. So what I intend doing, since there is a paucity of time, I will just say a few words about each session and then hand over to the speaker. And after all 5 speakers have spoken towards the end, then we'll have a question answer session. And then if there is something that I need to add, I would conclude the discussion by making final remarks. Our first topic today is South China Sea dispute, an Indian perspective. As we all know that Indo-Pacific was a center of gravity of the global power shift, but post-COVID-19, it has emerged as an epicenter of new Cold War. And within Western Pacific, among number of flashpoints that we have, the most volatile is South China Sea, because there are contesting claimants there, number of claimants, China being the most important. And this area, South China Sea, is extremely important for China. One, in terms of natural resources which are available. Second is, at least it's a western slope sea lanes of communication across Indonesian archipelago passes through South China Sea. It also figures out very importantly it's into its 2 ocean strategy, and a significant part of that 2 ocean strategy is China's counter intervention strategy. On the other side, it is implementing this strategy in a very incremental manner by what we call is cabbage and salami slicing strategy, in which it's nibbling into these islands, militarizing these islands and harassing some of other claimants from time to time. To counter this, we also have a very big player, which is a resident Indo-Pacific power, and that is United States of America. And it has its own version of what you call is US ARC strategy, where it is using Guam and Diego Garcia as the two strategic hubs, and a number of bases it has in the with the security alliance partners. And there is a very heavy forward military deployment of United States of America. And as a result, post COVID-19, there has been a strategic brinkmanship between the two sides, with Chinese making large number of dangerous maneuvers into South China Sea. And there's a quid pro quo from United States of America in terms of, phone operations, that is freedom of navigation operations. And very recently, just 2 days ago, there was some maritime reconnaissance aircraft which moved into the so-called Chinese airspace, as they claim it. And that was countered by China by firing DF-21 and DF-26 missiles into the Spratly Island. And there are many other developments which are taking place. So as a result, the risk of a accidental collision or some military target going down can result into a kind of a confrontation in this, which is not good for global peace and security. In this region, Indian interests are paramount, be our freedom of navigation, be it movement of our trades, be our respect for international treaties and things like that. And therefore, Indian Navy is well poised on the other side of Malacca Strait, and therefore it can play a role if push comes to shove. So with these few words, may I now request Dr. Amit Singh, Assistant Professor of ARSD College, Delhi University, to make his exposition in about 10 to 12 minutes. Over to you, Dr. Ravi.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful introduction about the South China Sea dispute. And already you have highlighted some of the points related to India's interest over there. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizer of this wonderful conference, especially Pramod, who has given me opportunity to share my views in this international webinar. I have deliberately opted this particular topic because the theme of the seminar is post-COVID world order, and at present, most of the scholars of the international politics are discussing more or less the same issues related to yes, COVID-19 is going to change the forthcoming world order permanently. However, there are different opinions of different scholars about this changing world order. But there is no doubt to what Major General B.K. Sharma has just highlighted. Yes, the recent upsurge in tension in the South China Sea represents a security flashpoint with global consequences. And there is a huge possibility this particular issue definitely going to alter the present world order in the international politics. I am having my PowerPoint presentation, so I may request the organizer, so please share the screen. My apologies for this delay in my presentation. So as you know, the topic of my presentation is Indian perspective, because there are various scholars who may say, what are the India's interests over there in the entire South China Sea dispute. Next slide. I have opted this particular topic with the objective related to analyze the various dimensions of this overlapping and conflicting claims in the South China Sea, and to highlight the strategic and economic significance related to South China Sea region, and to explore the possibilities of India to improve their bilateral and multilateral relation in the region to safeguard their foreign policy interests, or specifically the strategic interests in this particular region. Next. As rightly the chair has highlighted, and I have also mentioned, yes, this particular issue is having a potential of influencing the present world order, and with global consequences are definitely there. And it is maybe because of this particular issue, Samuel P. Huntington when he has written his famous book called Clash of Civilization Theory, Clash of Civilization, he has predicted a war in the South China Sea region, a war between China and Vietnam over the maritime resources sometime close to 2010, and possible intervention by US. And he just just as an astrologer, he has predicted a war years before. And no doubt from 2010 onwards, China has been very, very assertive in this particular region. And time and again, US is intervening in this particular area. And yesterday, I hope all of you are aware that yes, the China has fired a missile just to warn the plane or fighter planes of America in this particular region. More or less the same thing highlighted by Robert Kaplan in his book Monsoon, and he has also predicted a war in on the issue of maritime resources. Professor C. Rajamohan has also written a book called Samudra Manthan, and he has also believed that yes, the South China Sea is having a potential of influencing global peace. Next. As I have already mentioned, the South China Sea is a strategic maritime link and a vital gateway for shipping in East Asia. The tension in the South China Sea are also affecting India's maritime, commercial, strategic, and more importantly, energy interests in this particular region. And my prediction is that in the coming years, the importance of South China Sea, especially for India, is going to increase. Next. And for the better understanding of the audience, this is the map of South China Sea, and this is the 9-dash line, and China is claiming the entire maritime resources with the help of the 9-dash line. And there is no doubt the claim of China entirely based on historical records, and in the unclosed historical records stands nowhere. Philippines has dragged China in the court, and in which China has failed to produce anything concrete on this particular area, but by hook or by crook, China is claiming the entire territory. Next. And these are the claimants of the entire South China Sea region. Earlier, Indonesia has avoided this particular issue, but during the COVID pandemic time, China has claimed the Natuna gas field, which is at present outside of the 9-dash line. But now China has mentioned that no, Natuna gas field is also fall into their 9-dash line in this particular area. Next. So there is no doubt this particular area is very important for India. The South China Sea is the world's second busiest international sea lane of communication. Some of the world's greatest choke points are over there. But and China has published in Global Times a special report that termed the region as the second Persian Gulf, a repository of more than 50 billion tons of cubic oil and more than 20 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. EIA has also estimated South China Sea is having a significant numbers of oils and gas. Next. So Indian Navy has published its maritime strategy doctrine, the Indian Navy document Freedom to Use the Seas. They have mentioned India's maritime, they have highlighted that India's area of interest extends from north of the Arabian Sea to the South China Sea. And that is why, and the South China Sea is not only the strategic maritime link between the Pacific and the Indian Ocean, but India is also for India is also a vital gateway for its shipping for East Asia. The 55% trade of India with the Asia Pacific are transiting through this particular sea route. So that is why, and on the other hand, India is also eyeing energy resources of the oil blocks held by Russia in the Arctic. And if we are going, because we have signed various treaties with Russia, and if we are going to extract oil and gas from the Arctic region, then the South China Sea is the only shortest route to communicate with the Indian shore. That is why in the coming years, the importance of South China Sea is going to be increased. Next. The irony of the entire reason is that because I have highlighted in my own paper, this area is very, very important for our energy resources because we are importing good quality of coal from Philippines and Australia through this channel only. We are also eyeing other resources of Vietnam and Myanmar, and that is why this particular channel is very important for India. India is extracting oil and gas in this particular region since 1988, and not only India, Russia is also exploring oil and gas from this particular region. In this map, I have highlighted certain oil blocks, 127 and 128. No doubt, Vietnam is open to offer more blocks in this particular region, but China has objected our oil commercial activities in this particular region. But in block number 114 to 17, Russia is also exploring oil and gas, but China has never uttered a single word, but they are objecting India's energy activities in this particular region. That is why our commercial interests are there, our energy interests are there, and our strategic interests are there, because most of the ASEAN countries are feeling the heat of China's over assertiveness. China at present is working on its revisionist agenda and trying to change the status quo of the entire region. And we are already having our own border dispute. Presently, we have seen Galwan Valley and the entire skirmishes between India and China. And if ASEAN are seeking India's help to counterbalance China, then we have to be assertive in this particular region. The next slide. In this particular slide, I have highlighted the table for the past several years. We are extracting, especially from block number 6.1, every year almost 2 billion cubic meters tons of gas we are extracting from Vietnam. And this particular gas block are very important for India, or crucial for India, because what we are extracting from Azerbaijan, Shakalim and Syria is very less as compared to block number 6.1, what we are exploring over there. Next slide. So our energy interests are there, our commercial interests are there, and to safeguard our economic energy interests, India have to be there, and we have to be assertive in this particular region. And there is no doubt the growing influence of China in the Indian Ocean region and in the Southeast Asia is a critical reason for both India and ASEAN to engage strategically. Previously, we have seen during the Obama tenure, when he has announced its rebalancing Asia strategy, he has mentioned India can play a linchpin role in counterbalancing China. Because during the COVID-19, China is trying to change the status quo of the entire global politics. China wants to establish a unipolar Asia and challenge American hegemony in the global politics. They want to create a bipolar world, but a unipolar Asia. And unipolar Asia is not India's interest. Next slide. So in the end, I would like to highlight that yes, China is working on its revisionist agenda, and ASEAN seeking India's assistance and including US assistance to counterbalance China in this particular region. And whatever we have witnessed in the past 6 months, that is why I have emphasized, yes, India have to channelize its foreign policy substantially rather than symbolically. It would be beneficial for India to remain in this particular area to protect its interests. And this is the very opportune time for India to interact strategically with its ally in the region rather than symbolically. So our interests are there, and we are having our own dispute with China. That is why we have to remain there, and we have to protect our interests. India cannot isolate itself from the South China Sea because our various foreign policy, commercial and strategic interests are there. So with these words, thank you, Chair, and thank you, organizers.
Yeah. Hello. Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Amit Singh, for a very lucid and a very sharp presentation on putting across Indian perspective. I would just, before we get into question answer, which is towards the end, I would like to re-emphasize few issues here, that when we look at this Indo-Pacific, it is actually a dynamic coupling of Indian and Pacific Ocean. And we have this Strait of Malacca, Lombok, and then we have one more, this thing. So it's extremely important both in terms of global trade and global security. And everybody is a stakeholder there. It's not only China and US. And therefore, our interests are principle-based Indian interests. First, we say that freedom of navigation, access to global commons, then respect for international law, that is UNCLOS 1982, and all disputes should be resolved through negotiations and not unilateralism by this thing. And we are mindful of the fact that if things heat up in, say, in Gulf of Makassar or South China Sea, it will have a certain spillover effect into the Indian Ocean region. So therefore, whether India likes or not, we will have to have our tentacles up and be prepared for all kind of contingencies. Because one more issue which is very important, that there are no structured and institutionalized confidence building measures in South China Sea. The code of conduct is somewhere, it is mired into the geopolitics, and there are no other mechanisms which are in place to avert any kind of unintended or intended skirmishes. So this risk is very real. What we can do about it, probably we'll address it during the question answer session. Thank you very much for this presentation once again. Now our next session is by Dr. Aravind Yelery, and from faculty of HSBC Business School, Peking.
So I think he has
and
not
the
joined
title
yet.
is very...
He have not joined yet. We have to move to the
Huh?
third, and maybe he'll join in a while.
Okay, then we'll move to the third session. Our third session is by our next door neighbor, USI, or I think he's shifted now to Delhi University, Professor Sanjeev Srivastava, and he's talking about China's Belt and Road Initiative and US Indo-Pacific Strategy, challenges and prospects for rule-based international order. Again, extremely contemporary and a strategically loaded topic, because Xi Jinping has termed Belt and Road Initiative as an enabler of China dream. And we all know it is a multimodal transcontinental transoceanic project, which has a continental part and a maritime part. And is very much part of China's grand strategy, because through this Belt and Road Initiative, it wants to link the continental economic nodes with the important littoral states in the maritime space. And that would be an unprecedented step. And probably this is this is a ploy or a design to create a web of networks all over the globe. And through this, they want to induce a gravitational pull to some of the middle level powers and the low income countries, so that in times to come, their dependency on China increases and they make strategic choices which are in congruence with China's larger strategic interests. But Corona has imposed certain constraints, because Chinese economy is also contracting, and so has the capacity of some of these countries to pay back these debts. So there is some kind of a renegotiation taking place. And due to belligerent behavior of China, there is also a pushback particularly from some of the European countries. As I look at Belt and Road Initiative at this juncture, I feel it is making good progress in Eurasia, Africa, and even in South Asia. But there is a very strong push from Eastern Europe and some of the European Union countries how it plays out, what impacts it has on the international order, will leave to Dr. Sanjeev Shrivastav to enlighten us on the subject. Over to you, Dr. Sanjeev Shrivastav.
Thank you very much, sir, for asking me to deliver this talk, and also for chairing this session. And also, I'd like to extend my thanks to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, my very good friend, for inviting me to this very important conference. And as you have mentioned, sir, in your initial remarks about my topic, is that BRI is a very ambitious program adopted by President Xi Jinping of China. And since the time he assumed power as the president of China in 2013, this program he is running with a full zeal and enthusiasm, and he is trying to project this program as his signature program for his entire presidency. And as you know that in 19-party Congress, this idea of President Xi Jinping has also been included in the Chinese constitution. So he is trying to create a legacy of his own leadership in the entire China, and also he wants to leave his footprints around the globe. But the problem is that what kind of a program and what kind of a system he wants to create in the international scenario. And there are several questions which China has to answer. And still there is a lot of doubt about the various tenets and various features what China is trying to propagate. And one point which China's thinkers, China's various diplomats, they try to propagate, that they are not challenging international order. They are always arguing that they are not opposed to the processes of globalization. They are not opposed to any kind of international norms. But the fact is that this is not showing in Chinese behavior. China, though it says that it supports the processes of globalization, it supports the free trade, and it wants to help other countries, especially the smaller countries, the needy ones, with their money and for their infrastructure development programs, for their various highways, railways, electricity, etc., etc. But the real intent behind this entire BRI program is very, very doubtful. And that's what is concerning entire world. Not only the countries of the Indo-Pacific region, but the whole world is having a lot of doubts about BRI. So if China has to succeed with its BRI, then Chinese intention has to be very, very clear. I understand that there must be many Chinese thinkers who must be watching this program. I believe that there has to be a lot of clarity about China, unless until China brings about their clarifications about the various questions which are being raised around the world, this program is not going to succeed. And already there are several countries who have taken a step back, for example, Malaysia, and this could be followed by several other countries. See, the whole point is that there has to be an international rule-based order in the international community. I understand that this entire world in the present international system, states are still the most important players. States are the determinant factor of international rule-based order. But with the various processes of globalization, there's a huge connectivity, and also there is the interdependence of the nations on each other. There is a very intense process of globalization still happening. Even those who are raising questions about the significance and the relevance of globalization processes, they still believe that globalization is a process which is irreversible. I don't think that we can go back into the old age where the states will be performing on their own and they will not need each other. Even China developed in a very, very big way in last 40 years. China, from the 1979 onwards, since the time they started their economic reform, they developed in a massive way, in a big way. It's a dramatic change in China which has been brought in. But that China and Chinese leadership must never forget that that has happened with the intense cooperation of international community led by United States of America. When United States of America opened up to China, then only this entire reform process of China could succeed, and and because of that, China could thrive and could become prosperous. And that has happened with the existing order, which was created after the end of the Second World War 70 years back. And that order has to be respected. And if there is any effort to challenge that order, then I think there will be consequences for challenging it. And obviously, BRI, though on paper, on its various tenets, which is there on the paper, it says that they do not challenge it. But the Chinese behavior, if you look at, then it's a big gap between China's actions and China's words. For example, South China Sea has been mentioned. South China Sea, Dr. Amit Singh has mentioned in his paper, a very nice presentation. It's very clear that entire South China Sea region is being claimed by China. There are several other countries in the entire region. 35 lakhs square kilometer of that area is strategically so important. It connects Indian Ocean region with the Pacific Ocean. It has the Strait of Malacca, the so important region for the world. And this entire region is being challenged by China. How is it possible? Is it not a challenge? Is it not a kind of a concerning situation for the international rule-based order? Is it whether China is following a rule-based order? So this is the action of Chinese leadership is something else. And what they are saying in the paper about BRI and their intention about the global community and international behavior is something else. So that kind of a clarification, unless until comes from China, there is not going to be any certainty about the success of the BRI for China. And there will be questions raised several times, and in the future also the questions will be raised even much more efficient and in a precise manner, because in the Corona, after this Corona pandemic, and even during Corona time, if you look at the Chinese behavior, it has been so assertive. It has been so aggressive. And when President Xi Jinping says that he wants to attain a China dream, then the international community wants to know what is that China dream is. What kind of a dream China has about the international community and even for their own. So unless until those questions are being clarified by the PRC, there is not going to be any kind of a stepping back and asking those difficult questions to China. And let me come to the second part of my presentation. Because the BRI and its ambitious agenda, which has 65% of the total world population and 40% of the global GDP, and it encompasses the entire globe altogether. If they go ahead with the more ambitious program, then I think entire globe will be covered by this BRI. So what kind of a structure China wants to create? Whether it wants to become the middle kingdom, the center of the world, is that the China dream is? What kind of a dream China has? That clarification has to come. And because the BRI is not clear, it is very ambiguous, it is not very sure. The world international community is not very sure that what kind of a program it is. There are a lot of questions. There are a lot of concerns, and also it has been, these kinds of concerns are also because of the very, very aggressive and assertive Chinese behavior in South China Sea, on Indo-China border areas, in the Indian Ocean region, in Central Asian region, and elsewhere. So there has to be some clarification, and on that front, I would like to say that United States of America, which is the oldest democracy on the planet, they are very much geared up to deal with those questions which are being asked to China. And if China does not give a clear answer to those questions, and if China does not, reform its way of behavior, way of doing things in various regions of the world, I believe that there will be more assertive pressure, more aggressive pressure from the United States. And United States has come up with an Indo-Pacific strategy. This Indo-Pacific strategy is nothing new. this Indo-Pacific strategy was in the process of making. President Obama, when he was in office, he used to call it a rebalancing strategy towards Asian Pacific. So Asia Pacific region is no doubt is going to be the most important region of this world in this 21st century and maybe beyond, because this region is a very dynamic region and full of possibilities, full of resources, full of manpower, young population, and this region is going to be determining the entire the politics of the entire globe. And that this region is now going to be taken very, very seriously by United States. And United States, if you look at the US strategy in the various other parts of Asia, US was more focused in the last 2 decades, at least in the Middle East region and in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Libya, etc. And in the last 2 decades, China, what it has done is that it has built up strong, defenses in the entire China Sea, South China Sea, because it wants to dominate that entire region. And now, in this corona pandemic, what is being witnessed is that China is trying to be more assertive, more aggressive. If you look at the Chinese, recent skirmishes with Malaysia, with Vietnam, with Taiwan, in changing the one country, two system model in Hong Kong, and also the yesterday's event where China has fired DF-26 and DF-21D missiles. Those actions are very aggressive actions. And those actions are not going to be, unanswered by the international community. And especially United States, as Chair says, that United States is a resident power in the Indo-Pacific region. United States government, be it Obama administration, be it Trump administration, they consider themselves as a Pacific power. So this Pacific power is very much there to challenge Chinese assertive behavior. And that's where Indo-Pacific strategy is. I believe that Indo-Pacific strategy is the beginning of the response of the Chinese ambitious expansionist behavior. And this is just the beginning of it. Maybe this Indo-Pacific strategy will be followed by several other strategies which United States from time to time will adopt, like the Blue Dot Network, which President Trump had mentioned during his India visit also, and several other officials and top ministers of the US administration, they mention it. So several such initiatives will come into play. And also, not only United States, but also the other democracies of the world, like for example, India, Australia, Japan, and ASEAN countries, they may also come up with their own initiatives challenging the BRI initiative. And one of the initiatives is always under discussion, and maybe some progress will be made in times to come. That is Asia-Africa Growth Corridor. China is heavily investing in African countries. China is heavily, giving a lot of money to the various poor countries in Africa. So the Africa region is very much on the radar of China, and China wants to enhance its influence there as well. So considering the very ambitious plan of BRI and its unambiguous agenda and various kind of questions it has, the world has no other option but to come up with certain response. And I think that Indo-Pacific strategy is just the beginning of the response to the Chinese ambitious plans. And this plan, as and when it unfolds in the international community is also going to respond with their own plans. And Indo-Pacific, as I said, is just the beginning of that response. And now I will say that if it will be in the best interest of the international community if there are some understanding, if there are issues which are resolved on the negotiating table and does not go into any other domain, military domain. So it will be in the best interest. See, China has to realize, Chinese leadership has to understand that China could prosper, could grow, as I mentioned earlier also, because of the cooperation of international community. So China, because of that existing international rule-based order, which was created after Second World War, it has helped China to grow. It has helped China to survive and thrive and prosper and become a powerful state. But if China wants to challenge that existing order because of which it got somewhere, then I think it's going to be very, very consequential for China's future, because the international community and you know that most of the world, most of the international community is a democratic international community, and the institutions which were created after the end of the Second World War was also a very democratic institution. For example, United Nations Organization, which runs based on democratic values, democratic principles. And most of the countries in the international community, they share those values, they share those principles. And because of that, international governance is being done. So if China wants to alter that, and China wants to impose some authoritarian value system into the global system, I think that is going to be very much contested. That is unacceptable, and there is no other option for China but to accept those democratic norms, those democratic values, and China will also have to answer those questions, and it will be in the best interest of China and also for the international community if those interactions with that understanding is done on the negotiating table, not on various other domains such as military or economic actions domain. So this will be the best situation, and there is a high time because these are very uncertain times. I understand China's foreign minister, he says that there is a phase.
Please try and conclude.
There is a phase of a new Cold War. This new Cold War might begin, but it may not begin as well, because the old Cold War has a different context. This world which we are living in, there is still possibility for dialogue and negotiation and understanding and clarification on various issues. I believe the Chinese leadership will come out with clarification. But if they do not do that, if they do continue showing their expansionist, assertive, aggressive behavior, then I'm afraid that there are going to be consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Shrivastav, for a very comprehensive presentation. You put both perspectives in a very lucid manner. But the more point that we need to address during the question answer session is China has understood the limits of its BRI push. Some of the reasons are its own flawed policies and approach. Some is because of the economic contraction. There is also a huge pushback on the digital Silk Route because there is a rejection of 5G. But the problem is that despite a very, I would say, a very romantic Indo-Pacific strategy, still the contours of a very viable and sustainable counter-China, a balancing China strategy has not emerged. Even the blue dot network is more of a 3 countries India has not joined and did not put any money there to provide alternative developmental projects to the rest of the world, the developing world. So unless that money and that kind of funds is generated by the democratic world, probably China will still have that window, particularly in the low income group countries, unless we are able to put our money on the table and provide a better alternative to the rest of the world, which is aspiring to be developed, right? So with that, we can handle rest of the issues. And now we come to the next topic by Dr. Aravind Yelery from faculty of HSBC Business School, Peking. And this is about guns, germs, steel in the 21st century, how the US is giving away to China. And that is his Peking's view. And just to put this subject in perspective, I would like to say that if you look at the shifts in the global order which have taken place since the Second World War, we got into the Cold War, which was about the contestation of ideologies, and there were 2 military blocs. Then with the fragmentation of Soviet Union, we entered the new era, and that was American unilateralism and preemptive doctrine, American universalism and things like that. And they went into a strategic outreach, which was not sustainable. And that followed by about 2012 or so, what you call is the retrenchment strategy and pivot to Indo-Pacific. Concurrently, there was this engagement with China, and that was on trade and technology, and Chinese benefited a lot from US-driven international system. But subsequently, when the balance of power started shifting in China's favor in relative terms, now there is a by-consensus or bipartisan view in United States of America that something serious needs to be done to balance China. In the meanwhile, China has also squandered an opportunity to be a preeminent power because of its premature, belligerence and extremely assertive behavior. So today, I would say, with no matter this America first and whatever anti-globalization drive, we are on the crossroads. We are on the crossroads of a strategic uncertainty where Pax Americana has lost its sheen, and there is very little traction for Pan Seneca. So with that as a backdrop, I now request Dr. Aravind to enlighten us on this presentation. 10 to 12 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much. I would stick to my time. Well, I mean, when I was deciding about the topic, I wanted to encapsulate the Chinese rise or the Chinese presence in the pre-COVID and post-COVID scenarios, and how the views from the Chinese are different than the global view. Well, there are a lot of metaphors I'm using here. When I say Peking man, there are two metaphors here. The present Peking man is President Xi, certainly, but the first Peking man who instigated me to choose this topic it comes from 1921, a discovery of Homo erectus skeleton, south of Peking. That was in 1921, and I think after 99 years, 2020, we are very close moving to fabricating another story where China is trying to relocate itself at the center of not only economic geostrategic mesh, but also social anthropological levels as well. So the Peking man has two spectrums. One is how China has been at the center of global calculus, and how China is still at the center of global calculus, and how the post-war or the Western system have made it sure it doesn't lose its grip, but still stays at the center. Though I say that, and I would also make a disclosure that these are not views of my university, which is a public university and pays me the salary, but this is a view of an independent scholar and academician. And with that, I want to start and say that 1921 was also a year when the Chinese Communist Party was taking its firm shape. 1921 was also the year when, compared to 1994, the Chinese GDP was substantially high. There were a lot of social reforms happening in China. China was not losing the grip. It was a blip couple of decades between 21 to 49 when China literally had blipped out of international scene. But now post 49, it achieved what it wanted to achieve, politically. And then moving forward, 71, the Nixon's visit, 78, 79, US signed free trade agreement with China. And then China was trying to get its own traction back. When I use the term guns, germs, and steel, I mean, most of us have read this book by Jared Diamond, and he talks about how the two prominent questions are rather propositions, like why people in different continents developed in different manner and to different levels. And second thing, how one group of people could dominate the entire world development. He wrote this book about a decade back, 1997, 2 decades back, but still most of his prominence is validated in today's context. Because given that context, and if you're talking about a 21st century, US is performing, as a superpower, and China is going to getting closer to challenge that thing. So the whole context of looking at China or looking at the rise of global international political system from the eyes of the old rudimentary mesh of guns, germs, and steel have transformed in 21st century. And this in 21st century, we still see a rise of a different Peking man, different than 1921, who is trying to make its own space by outspacing other important players. Some of the important variables I'm going to discuss here, to start with economy. Okay, economy, I think most of the presentations would not try to avoid not to discuss about economy, but I would try less economy over here, but still it's mandatory for me to discuss an important issue over here, the economic rise of China. 1978, George W. Bush was in China on his informal visit. Okay, and 79, China signed trade agreement with United States. The United States started giving away a lot of foreign direct investment to China. In 1978, if I can borrow George W. Bush's word, he says that the benefit which is going to happen in the US case is 1 is equal to 10. That means that if we export 1 unit, we're going to get 10 units and 10x of benefits while doing trade with China. 1985, the sequence was that the Chinese were importing only 2 units and exporting about 8 units. So that was 4x. So George W. Bush failed to predict the China's growth and China's rise back in 1978. 2020, we are talking about China's rise. I think we're too late to talk about it. That has already been established. Because what happens in today's case, if you take trade war even, United States industry is losing ground to foreign competitors on price, quality, technology, and in many areas, their manufacturing capacity cannot compete with those exist in Asia. And here by Asia, I mean China, because predominantly has been one which is occurring or causing a lot of economic metabolism in larger Asia. Forget about economic China's rise. It has impacted collaterally on the Bretton Woods systems, starting with the World Bank and in the fund as well. On August 3, 16 US senators wrote to Secretary of State to Pompeo and Defense Secretary James Mattis. And the letter, the concern about how some of those countries which are partner of China in BRI are applying for the funds, IMF funds loans. This is something which has been undervalued or not been taken seriously by global strategy thinkers. BRI is not only a regional scheme. BRI is only about a scheme how that is going to benefit China. BRI is about an inverted model of globalization which China wants to deploy. At the same time, China also is on the verge of dominating the World Bank and IMF. Recently, you might have seen United States offered send $7 billion of US aid to the World Group of Banks, but with the only condition that the World Bank and IMF would give or lend loans to China on the higher interest rates. So that means that the Chinese have already occupied the space. Only is that we have realized it's very late. That's one. Second thing is about all of us are aware that how China has US is pulled out of Paris Agreement, right? Go back to Copenhagen summit, okay, when India, Brazil, and China were sitting together and were discussing how to negotiate with the United States. But there was a time on the second day when India and Brazil realized that the China had already went into and is talking to the United States bilaterally, how they can benefit on the matters of climate dialogues. So China has never been a team player, okay? This has to be understood quite clearly. And having that, US withdrawing in 2015 from the Paris Climate Agreement was a good climate governance, it is a US body to protect environment, to maintain the environmental standard created in 1970. Mr. Trump has been continuously cutting its funds for past 3 years. And the funds is only about 0.2% of the federal budget. Well, if you look at the number, it is huge as 8 billion, but in terms of percentile, it is very low. So there has been consistent effort by United States to give China a leverage or an edge as far as the climate change and environmental standards are concerned. Going to the third factor, which is quite important, is in innovation technology. China today is the second country which spends about 2% of its GDP in R&D. If you look at about Chinese patents filing, if you look at its research in generic technologies, has been predominantly helped China to climb up the value chain. This has not over the period of only 5 to 6 years. This has been happening in past 2 decades. Maybe for past 3 years, it has been accelerated at a high speed. Why it happens so? Because US is giving away its space to the Chinese innovation abilities. If I want to cite the Global Innovation Index, it cites that for past 10 years, China has come into the club of top 25 countries as far as global innovation is concerned. Right now, in the concluding year of 2019, China was at the 17th position and US was at 6th position. So you would say that the new variables to rule the world and to have a prominence or say in opinion making at global institutions has been already shifted to China. I'm not talking about the high net worth income groups or the capital flows, but these are the common variables which I wanted to highlight. Second thing, or maybe the fourth important thing, is about the multilateral financial institution regimes or post-war institution. We talk about WHO, okay, the recent one. Post-COVID eruptions, we have seen that the US has been behaving irresponsible as far as commitment towards WHO is concerned, right? In July, US withdrew from its commitment to the funds and its operational functioning of WHO. So that was one of the important criteria. I want to conclude with 2 things over here. Now, when we see that there are new wars being fought by China efficiently, including epidemics, there is a factor of germ and steel, which talks about its might. China never can be a great nation, but it's moving slowly inch by inch to become a superpower. In that context, if you want my readings, how China would emerge. Second thing is that in past 6 to 7 decades, when China is trying to develop, China is trying to occupy much economic space internationally, that is going to have its own negative impacts. For example, the rise of West, the chair can give me another 2 minutes, I'm going to just finish this. In 70s and 60s, when the West was outsourcing products, when they were diversifying supplies, they were looking at outsourcing markets, outsourcing countries, right? And that led to upstream activities. Upstream activities is where the R&D were put into the outsourced countries when the production facilities were taken out of or developed in Western countries. These developing economies, lower income countries benefited a lot. But in case of China and China's, the earlier speaker was mentioning about BRI, in the present context, the model which Chinese are implementing is not going to benefit these upstream activities. Please don't expect that China is going to share the technology or would try to make its neighbors how the technology helps, or that is not going to have its own spillover effects as far as local economies are concerned. Second thing, the Chinese have been already on the cusp of financial polarization. With the AIB and NDB, all of us are very happy that we are partnering China with AIB and NDB. But if you look at the reserve funds of NDB, China holds about 41% share, in the reserve contingent funds. As far as AIB is concerned, China says that it will not ever use veto, but it has the largest voting share. It would do the same thing what US does in World Bank. So that is going to happen. Third, an important thing is, a book written by Arvind Subramaniam, the former chief economic advisor, Indian government. The name is Eclipse. And China is really eclipsing by using some of these positions, some of these opportunities which have been given to them by the Western or by the West powers. So in the end, last 30 seconds, we see a new kind of China, which is again dominated by the Peking man, President Xi, and he understands that China controls all three segments: the power, the soft power, and also the economic power to control the 21st century. And China is steadily moving. Last 10 seconds, most of the commentaries which are coming out of Beijing are saying that US is dying its natural death, and it is giving China an opportunity to rise up. So they're just waiting for chances. They are not struggling too much, and they're not struggling to create their own space, but they are living on the space which has been given to them, gifted to them by the Western setup, by the Western systems in the today's context. Here I stop. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for a very interesting perspective. There is no denying the fact that China was a buoyant and a rising power, because it had all the matrices of comprehensive national power, and it was configuring that national power to emerge as a global player, as a superpower. But there are three factors which I think we have to take into account. One is the two disruptive figures. One is Trump. United States behavior cannot be totally confined to Trump era. We have to now look at post-COVID world in which probably Joe Biden, if he comes to power, may have entirely a different world view. And we have to look into that. Second thing is, even Trump probably, Xi Jinping has become a disruptive figure that during an era of COVID period, when they were supposed to provide a leadership to the rest of the world, they've gone into a belligerent overdrive. And therefore, to my way of looking at is that, are there any takers for today China's authoritative capitalism model? So we have to see whether China will have the capacity to provide a leadership role, substituting the United States of America. I think it's too early to predict that. With that, we move to the next topic, and that is the question of Uyghurs in China and international policies, for which we have Dr. Aradhana Talwar, who is a visiting fellow at NIICE, and she would be talking on this very important subject. As we know that this has become a major humanitarian issue, international human rights issues, because of China's Hanization of Xinjiang, and then how it's put about more than 1 million people in the so-called reformation camps, and the other oppressive measures which have been put in place, to quell that sub-nationalist movement and some of the sort of religious sentiments. And it has certain geopolitical and foreign policy connotations also, be it China's develop West policy, Central Asia policy, or South Asia policy. So over to Dr. Talwar, and you have another 10 to 12 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, organizers, for giving this opportunity. I would like to present on the Uyghur issue, the question of Uyghurs in China and international politics around it. Post-pandemic, this issue has come again to the center stage, and the international community should actually focus or at least understand the issue. What exactly are the problems and how grave are they in order to come to a solution? To begin with, why is the issue relevant? It is because in a globalized era, it has become essential for the international community to have some awareness of the issue and not see the problem of Uyghurs as theirs only. Because these domestic policies can very well impact China's relations with other countries at the international level. So, for example, human rights violation, as Chair mentioned, in one country hint at the conservative nature of that particular political system. And one of the important factors for international security in recent times has been the emergence of pluralist political systems that are more sensitive to the need for political compromise, appreciating the healthy and crucial role of criticism in any society. Thus, the Uyghur problem or the issue of Uyghurs should not be seen as their problem only and treated in isolation, but it needs urgently the attention of the international community at large. Now, specifically talking about China in case of the domestic and foreign policy, it is apparent that the concepts of sovereignty and stability are core to in the pursuit of national objective of the country. So these terms explain everything why China does what it does. So as simple as may sound, sovereignty and stability are colored with historical narratives in China and over a period of time have become overly complex. So for instance, for China's regime, any form of disturbance or a slight change in the country's periphery and surroundings is a threat to its core that underlines the factor of stability in the domestic policy behavior of the country. So it is very important to see the Uyghur problem in China within this larger framework. So as we all know, Uyghurs, they live in the Xinjiang province. Most of them live in the Xinjiang province of China, which is to the northwest. Important to understand the demography and geography because that's where the problem starts. Now, Xinjiang province is strategically important for China. It is surrounded by countries like Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, and India. So this makes the province extremely crucial for China. Also, it's an important resource-rich province. So for its economic development as well. So if it's here that we find Uyghurs who are Turkic-speaking minority ethnic group in China, and they have cultural resemblance to Central Asia, Central and East Asia. So they're recognized as a native of this province, and they form around 13 million of the population. And the predominant faith that they follow is Islam. Now, historically, it is believed that in 1949, before 1949, there were multiple waves of rebel and uprising staged by Uyghurs against the Chinese rulers or the dynasties of China. So in 1949, eventually it became part of China. So the Xinjiang province, according to my research, the northern part is called as Zungaria, and the southern region is where it's the Tarim Basin, where you find the problem of Uyghurs, which is predominant in this part of the province. Within Uyghurs, they have different set of degree ideology in terms of they differ a little bit in their degree and magnitude in the sense some believe in pan-Islamic vision, some believe in pan-Turkic vision. So this is their basic geography and demography of the province and the population. Now, why it's important to understand, because Uyghur problem in China is basically a socio-economic, cultural problem of the country. So at the core of Uyghur problem lies China's language, cultural, religious, and economic policies toward the minorities. So traditionally, as it has been observed that China had strong tradition of resistance to oppression and a substantial body of protest literature. China itself has a history of protesting and resisting the colonial rule, that it was a colonial state as well. So furthermore, traditional Chinese culture was not without the element of liberalism. So some scholars believe that in the past, the local, or what we can say, the village politics was less despotic than the national politics. So much so, this is reflected in the Constitution of China, which the various provisions talk about the unity of ethnic minorities in the country. It also tries to combat local chauvinism and says that state will do its utmost to promote the common prosperity of all ethnic groups. So much so that the Constitution also states that all ethnic groups have the freedom to use and develop their spoken and written languages, or to preserve their folklore, their indigenous culture and traditions. So where, however, on reality, the picture, there is a vast discrepancy between the state laws and the implementation of these policies in the country. So the ruling party views ethnic minorities and religious groups with considerable suspicion, primarily because these groups were seen to be more politically recalcitrant elements of society, who were capable, as the establishment believes, of subverting the existing state system and resisting its authority. So many times these groups, the Chinese officials found they did not sit comfortably with what is believed to be the nationalistic, patriotic values of the country. So Chinese policies or the Chinese officials also fail to understand some of the religious communities in China and their basic ideologies, their customs, their practices, which are very indigenous in nature. So as a result, harsh treatment has been meted out to these groups. In this connection, it is worth mentioning that the larger the cultural differences of the concerned group, the bigger the threat the community may appear to be to the state, and therefore the harsher the policies directed towards them. So most of the scholars believe that China believes in more homogeneity amongst groups that will ensure its political stability. Again, coming to the factor which I began with, the element, the concept of stability within the country and security for the state. So these repressive policies have also been used by political officials to ensure that the regime stays in power and safeguard their own interests. So the suppression of Uyghurs can be related to broader suppression of other groups in China as well, like Tibetans, journalists, or environmentalists, intellectuals, and the like. So for example, in the past, under Cultural Revolution, the worst affected were Uyghurs in China. They were not allowed to practice their religious customs, traditions, so much so that they were forbidden to eat, or they were forced to eat certain food items which were not permitted by their faith. This is because, as we all know, during Cultural Revolution, the very famous slogan of four olds need to be criticized, need to be banned: for old customs, old culture, old habits, and old thinking. So the oppression of Uyghurs has started right from 50-60 itself, from the time Xinjiang has become part of China. And it became even more visible after 9/11 attacks, because then it came to be linked to global political issues of that time. So we see numerous cases of disappearance, killing, mass murder, etc. of this minority group in China. Another very important point or element, factor that has to be considered is the economic and migration policies of the state. Now, Xinjiang is very important and vitally important for China, and control over it is a must because it is a source of mineral and other natural resources. So both international investment and development of industry require political stability. Again, the concept of stability, which is China's reason to tighten its grip over the region. So much so that migration from eastern China to develop this frontier region was encouraged as a patriotic duty in the past. So thousands of people have been arbitrarily detained in the region over the past few years, and there have been massive number of political prisoners. So much so that there have been huge migration of Han's population, which is the predominant population in China, leading to Hansification, as Chair mentioned, of the province, which has not gone down well with these ethnic groups, because they believe that this is a step taken by the state to change the demographic profile of the province. So when back 1949 to 50, there were around 60% of the population of Uyghurs and just around 7% of Han's population. Recent past, the population, the percentage increased of Han's from 9 to 42%. And likewise, on the other hand, the population of Han's of Uyghurs have decreased. So these are some of the policies which are deliberate attempts to change or to keep the political grip and ensure the stability of the core of the country by keeping these border areas under tight control of the regime without respecting the traditions, customs, their language, etc. Now, another important element in the treatment or the discriminatory policies of China towards these minority group is the language policy. So as we all know, around 92% of the population of the country is hence Chinese, and the remaining 8% of the population comprises China's 555 ethnic minorities. So ethnic minorities are also vast in China's border areas, especially in the west. And whereas the Chinese Han's population is concentrated in the eastern and southern parts of the country. So they now is what the popular policy of the government is, what it is called in China, the citizens of China, or Zhonggui Ren, as it is in the native language over there, which means that the promotion of Mandarin as the national language of China and the primary variety of Chinese has become the cornerstone of national development and ethnic unity. Termed Potongua, which is the common language by the nascent Chinese state 60 years ago. So this has again affected the minority groups who have their own indigenous language and culture. What this has led to ever widening gap between the official language policy and its implementation, which has led to severe disillusionment of these groups, especially the Uyghurs. So right from its inception, the central tenet of PRC language planning was to promulgate Mandarin Chinese, no matter, irrespective of the ethnicity of the speaker. Until late 1980s, China did follow bilingual policy of language, wherein minority language education and media was supported primarily by Mandarin, which was the primary or the main language. So eventually these areas, the border areas started, or where you have the minority ethnic groups residing, there were gradual restrictions imposed on these regions.
Please
So as a result,
try and contribute.
as a result, Mandarin has become key for individual economic development. So these are some of the factors, and of course, as Sir mentioned, in the recent past, in November 1929, there were reports that hundreds of Uyghurs were disappeared and killed and put in concentration camps. The children who came back to their homes from as far as Hong Kong, they found their families completely disappeared, and the regime has no answer to it. They are not responsible. So this has led to a lot of groups among the Uyghurs which fight for their cause. They're also termed as militant organizations, some of them non-militant and militant. So in conclusion, I would say that international community is more to some extent detached from the ground reality. What we see in relations or in the international level is politics of realism. So at times there are countries which will oppose Uyghurs, and at the same time they will support China, depending on the bilateral relations. So for example, post 9/11 attacks, US cooperated with China on Uyghur issue. They claimed one of the organization as terrorist organization. Now with this strained bilateral relations, again US along with UK and Germany have cornered China for the issue. But the point or the essence that countries are missing is the genuine grievances of this minority group in China. So the need of the hour is to have concrete solution to grave human rights violations in the country. Grave because hardly covered by the media, and no external actors allowed to research or to showcase these grievances at international level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation on a very, very important issue. I have traveled to Zangar Gate along the Central Asian border and also to Trim Shahar through the Sachin Glacier. And I was last year in Tibet, and I can correlate some of the observations that you have made. I spent about 7 days in Tibet. The irony is that China is getting away with what it is doing to this 12 million population there. There is a little pushback in Central Asia from Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. But most of the Islamic world is today a spectator. While they make a lot of hue and cry about, victimization of Islamic world, but when it comes to China, they're absolutely quiet, including our next door neighbor, Pakistan. And even like Turkey, which had given some space earlier to the Uyghurs, because this East Turkestan movement, they had a lot of linkages. Even Turkey has become quiet today. And America makes noises depending on its mood and its relations with China. Sometimes they ban it, and sometimes they say, well, let China have it as part of the three evils, what you call extremism, separatism, and splitism. So it's an irony, but in the long run, I think scholars like you should write more and more about it. We need to sensitize the international community and build some kind of a consensus that China cannot get away with such human rights violations. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
now
sir.
we come to the last topic, and that is a very interesting title: India Lead from Behind and US Leadership, Pandemic and Global Order, by Sachin, Tiwari and Ankita. Both are doctrinal candidates with JNU. And we have very limited time, about 10 minutes, so I will not give my introductory remarks. Let's listen to you, and probably maybe I'll say 1 or 2 lines in conclusion.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you so much. Hope I am audible, clearly audible.
Yes, yes.
So I would directly come, as the time is short, to what the presentation will consist of. So the presentation examines the changing global order, especially with the onset of the pandemic COVID-19, which we all are facing. The global pandemic exhibits an unexpected challenge to the existing liberal order, where the threat persists not only at the external level, but also at the internal. So I would be taking the US perspective into account about its leadership position, that how it is being revised. The pandemic has accelerated the power rivalry, industrial competitiveness, political turmoil, public health crisis, societal imbalances, which is shaping the balance of power and the overall international system. So my presentation is structured into 3 parts, which discuss the origin of global order and its practice during Cold War, the strengthening of the order, the expansion of somewhat, and then the what we are witnessing, what in academics we are calling it the unmaking of the order. So the origin of the liberal order. The fierce debates in the United States over the isolationism versus internationalism took a new dimension during World War II. One of the most prominent among these was devised during the war years in the form of the Atlantic Charter of 1941, which paved the way for an international order based on rules. It was important for predictability of some sort required under the framework of liberal order of common values and the need for a security environment globally. Germany's again going to World War was reminiscent of the fact. Soon after, in the post-war years, a major threat developed, which challenged the US not only materially, but also ideologically: Soviet Union. The famous letter from George Kennan, a US diplomat, letter X, outlined containment as answer, which shaped the Cold War years for the US leadership and order, reflecting those liberal values. Resulting decision was a series of events where US committed to alliances forged over the new threat, regime change, and war, most prominently Vietnam, which almost brought up political and social turmoil in the US. Nevertheless, this competitive environment of Cold War, the US sustained a global order based on the interests practiced in the name of liberal order and global engagement. The policy of liberal order became more complex with the addition of neoliberal economics under Washington Consensus, pushing for free trade policies masquerading support to open economies of developing countries. With the closing of the Cold War and the disintegration of Soviet Union, a role of the US was redefined with sole superpower pushing of the new liberal agenda further and unleashing of globalization. Technology boom, free market were direct outcomes, results of the same. Not to mention the humanitarian intervention around the world. It signaled a more aligned international system with that of the US interest. The decade-long period of hegemony was marked by an unexpected event. Events represents a sudden shift which has a profound impact on the policies which otherwise would not have changed so easily. 9/11 attacks brought to the US danger of attack on homeland, reality of terrorism, which had a deep impact overall in threat perception. Two consecutive wars in Afghanistan and Iraq followed based on the idea of military superiority and a swift war winning, the outcome of which has effect on US power both militarily and economically. The other important event which I must mention was the 2008 financial crisis, which brought a long recession, massive unemployment. The results were carried in Obama presidency with questions of military withdrawal, both from Iraq also as well as from Afghanistan, and economic recovery taking the center stage. In many ways, the shock of that was continued in the election of Donald Trump, with the policy of America First, bringing manufacturing jobs back to America, and the reality of stating China as a strategic competitor. This has been highlighted in the national security policy subsequently with massive trade deficit, espionage, technology, aggressive military posture, all combined in that. It signaled a departure from the much promoted idea of and policy of liberal order from the predecessor presidents who were keen on promoting it. So much to the challenges confronting the US, from economic leadership to technology to geopolitical reality and issues at home, the pandemic has not only promoted the upending existing global order, what it has done is hastened and intensified trends that were already apparent in international politics, some of which I mentioned. Now, coming to the COVID-19 pandemic and the reshaping of the global order. I think one of the most important trends which has come when we analyze even the behavior of United States is its own domestic politics. The things were there, but they have magnified on a certain level. I will talk about what they are. So in this context, global pandemic COVID-19 presents an unexpected event in which the US was caught off guard. Even with ample warnings from institutions like WHO, the US squandered every possible opportunity to control the spread of coronavirus. The response from administration was alarming. One of the first reactions to the pandemic from President Trump was, "We are rated #1 on the basis of preparedness for pandemic in early February." Second is the problem where US government dubbed the entire pandemic as China problem and questioned its own public health agency officials and information. This stands in contrast to other major countries which allowed stricter measures immediately to control the situation. The crisis reflects the problem of bringing order to the house, despite the several instances of the US to handle public health situations from anthrax bacteria attacks right after 9/11 to SARS in 2003, Ebola in various capacities, the priority of public health was downgraded. One of the most prominent was in 2018, they took out an office responsible for public health. Recently, it happened. So the actions to control the virus with a massive financial package in form of the Coronavirus CARES Act, that was in March. And subsequently, they have again gone for a $3 trillion package. So this last package have failed short to pass from US Congress, where we are seeing the kind of partisan politics between Democrats and Republicans over the bill. Now, these are met with challenges of record unemployment, and most importantly, racial inequality resonated in the form of Black Lives Matters. As we are witnessing on TV screens, the violence which is happening right now in the US is alarming for a country of such a stature. Though it is not new, but with the coming of the pandemic, it is certainly very alarming. The global pandemic has the global pandemic has limited the capacity of the US to act in any way as a leader of global order, but to bring order back to its house. So despite the fact that pandemic has dominated the news for much of the year, and reasonably so, as people and industries fight for their endurance, long-lasting issues have been unfolding in the background that many businesses need to struggle with. The great decoupling of US and China. COVID-19 pandemic has made us onlook a downward spiral in relation of the two world's largest economies. The problem of the greater dependency on China has been highlighted with supply chains and manufacturing base there with critical medicines, equipments as ventilators in scarce supply. What was happening before has been accelerated by a pandemic to the decoupling of US-China, which seemed impossible due to the level of interdependence. According to John Bolton, former National Security Advisor, the economic decoupling between US and China is not only possible, but is happening. Even President Trump proclaimed that we'll fully restore America's manufacturing independence, bring home our critical supply chains, and permanently end our reliance on China. But these remarks actually highlight a situation which is far from reality and focuses more on a position where the elections are drawing to a close in November 2020. On a similar line, these kind of actions are not just limited to US, but other countries are also doing the same. Japan provided incentives to its company to move back, and there have been a number of other attempts, prominently in case of technology of the 5G installation, the banning of the Chinese app. One can question how much they are feasible, because the right now in the globalized world, the supply chain is much more diversified, even if one country wants to. So the global economic structure is being reshaped, and it has pushed for greater self-reliability and control, which would have actually a lasting impact on the global economy, and also the emergence of new manufacturing hubs and supply chain structure, which we would see. Moreover, one of the things Chair also highlighted was the idea of the US carrying the burden of the world, which has been specifically highlighted in Trump's presidency, and the fair responsibility has occurred as a regular theme in the US. Examples are numerous, right from the relevance of NATO, the withdrawal from Paris Climate Agreement, questioning of the United Nations. Even during the pandemic, the Trump administration continued its attack on the multilateral institutions. This time it was World Health Organization, whose suspicious role in reporting COVID-19 virus and pressure from acting as a China stooge was targeted. A very different situation where actually the US has dominated the central stage in these institutions earlier. So coming to post-COVID-19,
You
can we
please
draw
try now. Just you have another 1 minute now.
So what is expected of the US behavior was not a self-centered position with its own internal rift overtaking the pandemic. In the worst case scenario, the position of the US with one of the world's best health infrastructure signaled a less confident America with its own leadership caught in turmoil. Also, during the pandemic, the struggle for power has continued unabated. In case of China, it has advantages of recovering early, whilst the US is still grappling with the highest number of death toll. So the last concluding thing is, despite the weak model shown by the US, the model by China, which has also been growing up at the with the rapid economic growth, has also taken a hit with pandemic and with this coercive behavior in the name of economic nationalism, military posture, turning the countries more wary of its actions. Therefore, the US remains relevant to maintain the global order. However, it is undergoing changes where the role of the reality of geopolitical situation, the conflict, not only with China, but with Russia, Iran, maintaining its economy, innovation, and social stability will lead to a much changed role where it has to be aligned more with emerging powers, prominently like India, which shares fundamental values with it. Thank you so much for paying attention and here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was a very rich perspective of the events that have led us to the present juncture. And I would just leave a few thoughts for you since you are a researcher. You see, at this juncture, we are into a VUCA world. And what is the VUCA world? The VUCA world is volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex world. You know, we do not have a very clear international order. Here, what I'm looking at is probably we are heading more towards a asymmetric bipolarity. And when we look at asymmetric bipolarity, that means we will look at a China-centric Eurasia, where interests of China and Russia are by and large aligned, at least in the short to mid-term. We look at maybe post-Trump, we would look at a US-dominated Euro-Atlantic order because US will bounce back. But there is going to be a diffused order in the Indo-Pacific because there are so many issues which are intersecting there in the Indo-Pacific, and none of these two blocks will become an emerging. So that we need to watch what kind of order we are likely to have in the Indo-Pacific, and I look at it more of a diffuse and a redistribution of power in the Indo-Pacific. Now, in that redistribution of power, where does India fit in? We were aspiring to be from a balancing power to a leading power, but COVID-19 has put a huge drag on our own capacity to actually be a player of substance because our own neighborhood here and the Pak-China strategic nexus is tying us down in a significant way. Now, therefore, what opportunities the new geopolitical arena throws for India in terms of our participation in Quad, D10, whether it is an expanded G7 or any other democratic alliance or alignment that comes up to balance China in the Indo-Pacific. I think India will have to rethink, reset its strategy and recalibrate its foreign policy to be a player of substance in the emerging world order.
Thank you, Chair, distinguished Chair, speakers, ladies and gentlemen. As we come to the end of this session, I deem it a great honor to propose a vote of thanks on the behalf of NIICE and WPC to all who have graced us with your presence and contributed their parts to make this event a resounding success. First of all, we would like to express our profound gratitude and sincere thanks to Major General B.K. Sharma for agreeing the chair and moderate the session today. A sincere thanks also goes to all our speakers for being a part of the event and delivering such a comprehensive and convincing presentation. We are really honored to have all the speakers with us here today. We would like to acknowledge our gratitude to our friends from the diplomatic community, experts, academia, media, and different organizations. Finally, I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for our audience who participated in the webinar and those who are watching us on the live online YouTube channel. Thank you for your valuable time and attention and for making the session productive with your questions. We are truly honored to have you all with us this afternoon and hope to stay connected with you in the future as well. Also join us at the next session. Thank you. Thank you so much.